Attorney Alice Nkom is a determined woman who has witnessed the violation of homosexual rights in the hearings of the criminal courts in Cameroon, and as a lawyer she decided to take action. Today she embraces a new role at the United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. She shared her hopes with our correspondent in Cameroon, Abubakar Munchili.
Ms. Alice Nkom, good morning. The President of the United Nations Human Rights Council this year appointed you as an expert on the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. Can you tell us about this role and how you intend to approach this mission?
I
approach this subject with great enthusiasm. For me, I'm honored by the appointment because it allows me to help not only the LGBT community of Cameroon or of Africa where they are suffering, but also all people of African descent. As this is about discrimination, for us, we will bring our expertise and our knowledge to the ways in which we intend to enable the UN to improve its work and programs, providing for the security, the means and the well-being of the people of African descent who suffer enormous discrimination in the world. Remember the case of George Floyd and what is happening today in Ukraine when it comes to evacuating those in danger because of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Les personnes en danger du fait de la guerre russo-ukrainienne.
You know very well what the outcome was for the other refugees, whose skin color was black, and this continues to happen.
It
is therefore all these things that the United Nations wants to focus on to bring about an improvement, so that we can make recommendations, we can tell them about what needs to be done to improve the unbearable discrimination of people of African descent.
You are known for your defense of LGBT rights. Why did you decide to help the homosexual community?
Ce choix s'est imposé parce que
I came to that decision because I attended criminal court hearings where I saw homosexuality as a criminal offense.
And
I saw many poor young people arrive at the hearing chained, where they were accused of homosexual acts. These gestures were natural gestures. For example, we see two boys holding hands, and in an instant, the police round you up and take you to court. You're sure to be convicted because in the Penal Code of Cameroon there's an offence of Article 347A from that time called homosexuality.
De l'époque qui s'appelle homosexualité.
And so you were arrested and you had nobody to defend you. I have never seen a lawyer stand up to defend these people. And that really struck me terribly. And subsequently, because of certain encounters that I had with young people, I decided that these people who were simply denied rights and citizenship and who have been left behind by the law, by society, by legislators and politicians, someone would have to take care of them, and I thought that it was an unbearable hypocrisy because they were people from a certain background, from modest background, that they were the ones who were going to be penalized by the law. I said, no, I need to do something about this.
Les foudres de la loi. J'ai dit non, il faut que je fasse quelque chose.
In 2003, you founded ADEPEHO, the first association for the defense of homosexual rights. Almost 20 years later, what has changed? Are homosexuals still afraid to join an association defending their rights?
Many things have changed. Of course, the changes aren't that obvious, but imagine that 20 years ago, I was able to put forward and legalize at the prefecture an association that I called on purpose Association for the Defense of Homosexuality. When we know that the prefect has the power by law to refuse to legalize an association that is contrary to good morals, to public order, and that on top of that, this association will defend what is prohibited and penalized and punished as a criminal offense, you understand that it was something important. But I did it on purpose. Why? Precisely because I didn't want to hide. And I wanted to have the opportunity to explain to everyone that this article of the Penal Code which penalizes homosexuals is totally illegal. Totally, because the laws of Cameroon are not only the law that is voted by the National Assembly.
Parce que les lois du Cameroun, ce n'est pas seulement la loi qui est votée par l'Assemblée nationale, mais il y a surtout
But there is, above all, international law, international rights according to the principle of the hierarchy of norms, which is a constitutional principle provided for in Article 45 of our Constitution, which requires that the Constitution of Cameroon never violates the general principles that have been established by international law, which is the law of the President of the Republic. Article 43 of the Constitution says that international conventions, international law in general, this is the law that is negotiated, signed by the President of the Republic. Thus, when he takes the oath, it's the prefect who represents the President here, it's him. It's the continuation of this commitment of the President of the Republic that the prefect is responsible for locally. However, we have seen that locally this is not at all the case. So I had to take the opportunity to explain text in hand to Mr. Prefect why he had to defend homosexuals, why he had to legalize this association. And that's what happened. I didn't want to start this fight hiding or adding to the general hypocrisy of people who are gay, but who, because they are well placed, will never be prosecuted. I didn't want that. I said I will deal with gay rights as universal rights, human rights, like all the others.
Miss Alice Nkom, you were Cameroon's first female lawyer. How did this come about?
Je suis arrivée là parce que
this came about because I married a man, Mr. Poko Siendumbe, not to say his name, rest his soul, he has since passed away, who had found these human qualities in me. I didn't like injustice. I didn't like that human beings could be made to suffer. I always have, and so he very subtly suggested that I become a lawyer, when in my head I wanted to be a doctor. That's why I chose scientific studies up to my baccalaureate. So it was he who wanted me to translate into a daily professional reality this calling I had for always defending the widow and the orphan, to defend the person who is suffering, to say no to the suffering and injustice that I saw around me. It's him. I owe him that, and today I never stop thanking him for it, because indeed I feel deeply that I am a lawyer. I feel deeply that I am a humanist. I feel deeply that I am a defender of human rights, and I am very comfortable defending minorities, and in particular sexual minorities.
You left to study law in France in the early 1960s. What are your memories of that time?
Excellent memories of a young girl who discovers the world, who discovers Paris and France. But above all, what stood out for me there was that I discovered Africa through the Federation of Black African Students in France. It was called the FEANF, where I got to know people from Gabon and everyone, and I also got the meaning of commitment to defending the homeland and Africa. It was a great experience. I studied in Toulouse, and in Toulouse I met a group of Africans with whom I felt completely in security, like a family, and they taught us the mission that we had come to France to complete, to work, to study, to be among the best. And that's what we did.
How was it going back to Cameroon? Did you find it difficult to work in the still predominantly male legal profession? What were your first cases?
Not
only masculine, but foreign. There were not a lot of black lawyers, but I approached my legal studies, my career as a lawyer, with great confidence. Because even before this, I had set myself some goals and challenges. And I know how to deal with a challenge. Challenges are overcome by working hard, by having an ethic, such that no one would fault you in your personal or professional behavior. I can tell you that when I began litigating, I was sent to litigate criminal matters in criminal court. You're face to face like a boxer. We didn't have a shirt, we had nothing. It's your face is out there. Well, that's criminal practice.
Votre visage est à découvert. Eh bien, c'est ça la correctionnelle. C'est-à-dire tout ce qui est vol, tout ce qui est...
All that is theft, crime, all that you can imagine. However, with civil law, social law, labor court, you draft, you file.
Vous rédigez, vous déposez. Mais on m'a envoyé...
But I was sent to deal with criminal matters because all the bosses, all the partners of law firms in general, they don't like to waste their time in court. So they send the interns or the young lawyers to go prove themselves there. And that's how I started. That was the challenge. I spent all my nights studying my files and reviewing the minutes of the proceedings, trying to figure out how I was going to speak. Because I had this challenge, I had to prove myself in a typically male and foreign environment, and it was predominantly foreign.
Which battles do you feel you have won, and which ones do you still want to fight?
Le combat pour ce que je fais.
For what I do, it is an endless battle. I will never finish it. If I can take credit for anything, if I can allow myself to speak in this way in all modesty, it is to have started it and to see that in these times I was the only female lawyer in 1968. Today, there are more than 4,000 lawyers who are members of the bar, and more than half of them are women.
Plus de la moitié est féminin. Ce sont des combats.
These are the battles. These are the wins, the victories, but they are small compared to the goal that I have for myself, which is to obtain the decriminalization of homosexuality in my country of Cameroon. Because all the laws that are there, all of them together, as I told you earlier, advocate for there to never be a law penalizing who someone is. It's as if you were being penalized in a country for being black. You can't do anything about black skin. You can't do anything about your sexual orientation. It's a part of you.
With what you have learnt, what advice would you give today to a young female African lawyer?
Une jeune avocate africaine qui choisit ce métier-là.
A young female African lawyer who chooses this profession, firstly, bravo for having the courage, because we don't choose this profession if we don't have a lot of courage, and African women do, and this courage must lead them to be the best lawyers in the world. What does that mean? There are just a few ethical conditions. They must be flawless in their respective ethics, their code of conduct, and, above all, be close to the interests and trusted to them. Be both the lawyer but also the listener. This is important, to be an expert in the subject matter of the law that will be applied to her client.
Être experte en matière de connaissance du droit qui sera appliqué à son client, se donner à fond pour que le client
to work very hard so that the client is always sure that he or she is not alone.
Et que face à
And that, in the face of adversity, in the face of the harshness of the law, in the face of the severity of a judge, he or she is not alone, and that his or her lawyer will do everything so that the right or the law, which is above all the protector of human rights, it is first the protector before it is the punisher, that she knows that everything has been done to ensure that the protective law triumphs over the judge's decision.
Qu'il emporte sur la décision du juge.